Greetings, Nia Koma. It's Mansho and Nawasha, simplifying the intimate love relationship for Blacks in leadership who want to win at love without wasting time in counseling, sacrificing work, or losing their sense of self. What's happening, family? We come in to just talk about last night's conversation. 5 things that we learned about sex talk. So last night we had our bi-weekly gathering of the Black Love School, the International Relationship Academy of singles and couples who come together to live, learn, and love in community. We focused on the pre-recorded class called Sex Talk. Now we're in the semester called The Heat of Love, where all the focus is on intimacy and sex. So if you're not familiar with the Black Love School, we have over 50 pre-recorded audiovisual classes that are in your membership, and we come together to talk about them as a group, right? The hard work and what the content of the class. So last night we were talking about sex talk, the before, during, and after communication of sex inside yourself and with your partner. So last night was a very, very interesting conversation, to say the least. And we're saying that we really learned 5 things as a group, right? So we want to chop them up and get into them. So the first thing that we learned that when sex talk is done correctly, it's really the bridge to real potent intimacy, right? So if we're doing it correctly, right, we're communicating within ourselves about what our intentions are, what our desires are, and what we want to share. Then, for those of us that are in relationships, because many people in the conversation last night were not, what is it that is the appropriate way to present our desires, our intentions, and the things we want to share with our partner? What's appropriate before, what's appropriate during, and what's appropriate after. But similarly, what can be inappropriate, right? So that's the first thing that we learn. There is a bridge that makes mind-blowing, holistic, divine, sacred sex. And that bridge is really actually thrashing it out. In fact, somebody was saying, and I thought it was very well said, that if we kind of like talking to each other well, we're more participatory, we're more excited, we're more alluring. The mental is the bridge that stimulates from good conversation. So anything you got on that? Anything you saw last night?
I think it is definitely interesting that there is so much of a mental aspect and emotional aspect to sex. Because right. I think that when you first say sex, people are thinking about the physical and the mechanical. And I think when you put in, the cultural lens, or what we're saying is an indigenous, so like an original cultural lens to something, the physical is last, right. So whatever you see materially, and this is literally anything, that wherever you are, you look around, anything you can touch, that's material. This came after a thought and after a feeling about it. Right. So this is everything you ever bought, right? This was someone's idea before it became an actual thing. Right. And that is true in sex. Someone has to be thinking about it. Someone has to have a feeling about it to initiate that the actual activity would happen. So although the people who were on the call, we always have a mix of people who are single, people who are committed, people who are married, people who are married longer term, people who've been divorced. Right. We always have a mix of people who are interested in learning about the art and science of intimacy, or the art and science of Black love culture. All of the people were adults who had sex. Right. So even thinking of past sex, you're thinking about all of the things that are happening. So like that bridge to intimacy, there's so much when it comes to thought. And from what I was hearing and what I know, we do these classes on a rotation, and we've done the sex talk live Q&A before. What is overlapping what you would call intimacy are things like your past with sex, your if you've ever watched pornography, if you've seen a movie. We talked about like the telenovelas, and we talked about, the global novellas, the world stage, putting things out about what it means to actually be intimate. So it's interesting because talking about it does make things that are not concrete more material and concrete. And I think it's something that we skip. Even when a lot of people talk about sex, they talk about the mechanics, like how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, what kind of positions they're going to be in, what else they want to add to the mix of whatever is happening physically. But what we opened with was talking about what intimacy actually means to you, right? And what sex is going to mean to you. And that is actually what makes you closer to someone, because how we opened with a couple of the women speaking first about being more vulnerable in sex, more relaxed in sex, more present in sex, instead of thinking about performance or thinking about how their man is going to rate them, and then losing some of the actual intimacy even while you're going through the mechanics.
Right.
So I thought that was a really interesting takeaway.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
How you want to show up in sex is sometimes not how you show up, because your mind or your thoughts are getting in the way of, you can actually, and I think we know this to be true. You can be doing something physically and your mind's not there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can be driving somewhere and be like, why am I going this way when I want to go someplace else? Right. You can be reading something. This happens to me all the time, and lose your thoughts, right? And then have to reread the paragraph or start over at the top of the page. And I think that the most intimate thing that we can be doing is having sex. And that still happens, that your mind can wander, that you're thinking about the other person in a way that causes anxiety or stress, rather than thinking about really connecting with them.
Yeah, I think that's profound. And I think, like what I saw was the women did start first, and they were sharing, insightful perspective. And it started like the conversation started building in intensity, and then the men started sharing, and it was interesting. But that was the first thing that we learned. The second thing that we learned is that while in our fractured state, what most of us default to is doing sex with a partner that we don't talk to about sex. And I've recognized this for many, many years, whether in myself at a period in time in my life, but definitely working, in relationships, work with people. I think it's amazing. And I was saying it again last night. I think it's amazing that a person, you can have sex with a person and do everything, explore everything from A to Z, but it's very hard for you to talk about sex with that person from A to Z. And so why do you think that is? And what did you get from last night?
I think we don't explore ourselves enough with some kind of deeper awareness, So I also think that sex is a stress reliever. It's a peacemaker. It's so many things that what we're actually using it for, that it is easy to do it. Like I said, like it's easy to do the sex for most of us, or I should say easier than to talk about it. And I think that that's because we're in a overly sexualized culture, community, where every sex is used to sell everything. So we're comfortable with the physical. In some places, you would be shocked to see the things that just come up in a commercial that's on a billboard, but not here, right? So we have, I think, we're desensitized to how sacred it actually is to see someone without their clothes on, or to be witness to a spiritual act, in a sense. And talking is something that we are unpracticed with in culture, especially in a very independent culture, where you don't really consult people before you take action. You don't, you don't have a communal thought process, right? So what we practice is an overindulgence in sex presentation. Right.
Right. Right.
And we don't practice intimate conversation. So that conflict or duality of my innermost thoughts are more private and sacred than the display of sexuality, I think makes it easier to jump into a rhythm of acting in sex versus to be really open about your deepest thoughts.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that the majority of us don't have intimacy. We're using each other for sex. We don't really love each other. We don't really like each other a lot of times. And so we're having sex via pressure, via lust, via pacification. And we'll talk about that, gratification. So we're basically having sex with people we don't know. And I'm saying we don't know them intimately. We don't share intimacy with them, even though the act is intimate. We kind of talked about that last night, corrupting the spiritual act. And is sex spiritual? And we all agreed sex is always spiritual, even between a prostitute, in porn, whatever. The act itself is spiritual, but the way we use it can be corrupted but I think, in my personal experience and talking to thousands of people, the reason it is not, we're not talking before, during, after, in a way that is bringing us closer together is because the way we're using sex, we ain't even looking for that. We looking to use each other to get high, right? And, I think in concert with what you said, because I think your view was maybe a relationship that is growing and developing over time. But I'm talking about the casual sex culture as well. We just ain't, we just hitting it, right? So that's all we doing. And we're using our sexual attraction to be drawn to one another, and then we're engaging in casual or shallow sex. And so as a result, it's not a whole lot to talk about. I think that's what's happening. But I think both of those things concurrently happen. Like I said, what you really share in relationship. And then for those of us that are relating to one another and having relations, but we ain't really building nothing. And both of those things exist in plenty out here. So we have to understand. Okay. So the next thing we learned and the next thing we discussed was that our environment, number 3, is that our environment really controls where our mind goes around sex, which then determines what we're talking about. And we were talking about the Netflix special called Polygamist, which is new and out there about our brothers and sisters on the continent and what they dealing with, very much the same stuff we dealing with, and the influence of colonial culture on our people and the product that goes out. We're in psychological warfare. So what we think is entertainment is selected. We don't see indigenous Black culture when we see Black people in different places. We see popular Black culture, which is the same whether you're Black in Italy, Black in Australia, Black in Africa, in America. There's nuances with language and dress and various things, but the principles are the same. So I didn't get a chance to watch it yet. I was supposed to start watching it after we had the class, after we had the live Q&A, but I chose to watch something else and then fell asleep when, got caught up and went to bed. So I'm going to check it out because so many people are talking about it. But we also talked about the fear that is promoted and through the environment and the uncertainty, the shame of, whether it's our body count or, a venereal disease or abortions or rape or even some pedophilia and things that have happened or things that they've participated in or things that have been thrust upon them. How do we talk about that and share that with potential partners and when is the best time to do that. So that was really, really interesting because both the men and the women, single and mated, were giving very insightful and enlightening things on that. And I see that we all hold that. We all hold that guilt or that pressure. Mm-hmm. So in just what we're striving to do is see the environmental talk. And we're not the only ones. There's thousands of people out there, but we're up against millions, right? We're seeding the talk of true intimacy and true love and the profound pleasure and lust and desire in a positive way so we can normalize the intimate conversation that will create the mind-blowing sex. So anything you want to add on that? Or
I mean, I think like I mentioned, we're just in a culture that's very sexual, mm-hmm. physically, so very materially sexual.
Right.
So I do think that there's a difference between what's normal and what's natural.
Right.
And so that's when something is normal and it happens a lot, it gets a certain kind of energy around it. And there's like this frequency. Like you said, I'm going to check this out because a lot of people are talking about it. Once there gets some momentum around a thing, it catches more momentum, right? This is sometimes what you learn like in science, right? You're talking about the physics of a thing, but our thoughts go the same way.
Right.
So I think that that's something that we have to know. We're in a void of what's natural for us. So I think we feel it, which is why certain things are odd or it sticks with us or it even becomes what we want to talk about because it's almost being compared to something that we can't see, but that we know or we feel.
Right.
So when we're having, like we talked about in the class, that water cooler talk, mm-hmm. it is the idea of you can do that much differently now on the internet and social media. Like we're instantly connected to each other compared to even maybe like 2 decades ago. Right. So like even I would say 10 years ago, there's a big difference in how we can communicate with each other. And
I agree.
Definitely since 2020, mm-hmm. this idea of Netflix has boomed, like since 2020, since quarantine, since people being in the house.
Zoom.
And right. So I think that, we've had a quickening in our access to each other. Right. So what might have been in a smaller circle with genuine friends that you knew and that you talked to and that you might actually see in person is now a conversation among friends that you've never met in person, and I'm using the term friend lightly, but people who you come in contact with, right? So we're able to have very intimate conversation with each other just from chiming in on a post.
Right.
Or we can have intimate conversations about a conversation that we saw. So like we can just screenshot 2 other people in an intimate conversation that we don't know at all, don't know the context for. And then we can start a whole nother conversation like, what do you think about this in our group? And I think that it poses, we sometimes confuse the fact that something is so normal or so prevalent, right? And so presently happening.
All right, y'all. So we back.
We're back with number 4.
So number 4, what we learned was that we all only have a few stations. Like when I'm saying stations, I'm saying psychological, mental, emotional, and physical stations that we rest at, like home frequency, home location when it comes to sex and sex talk, right? So we're either in, I think last night we talked about 4 categories, but we even distilled them down just to present today, just in 2 categories. Like one is lust, emotional gratification, feeding that insatiable appetite, perversion and freak culture. And then the other one is intentional, holistic, divine, nation building, psychologically healing, using sex to heal the psychological wounds of your life experiences, and procreation, right? The mind expansion of holistic love. Like everything is really in one of those 2 categories, right? So we talked about the insecurities that we have. We talked about the fantasies and the the lust desire that we feel, what we're really, really attracted to, and how we act, and what we're willing to do in those situations when we're in those situations. And then we talked about juxtaposing it and comparing it to something that's higher elevated. And something that we came up with that I thought was interesting is that oftentimes when you present these two dichotomies and these two polarizing opposites, some people will say, well, I don't care about that higher stuff. Like, I don't ever get there. I just want to get off. Like, I just want to come. I want to reach orgasm, which they improperly label because, from an indigenous perspective, we're always saying that the orgasm is the simultaneous climax and not an ejaculation or an ejaculation. So that's a consistent sidebar that we recondition because of the way we've been miseducated. But what we said about this idea that the higher stuff doesn't matter, I just need to get off. You're saying that because all you ever do is get off. But when you can compare the two, it is a very different world. And when you have frequency with both of them, it is a no-brainer choice. It's like asking a person, what's better for you, being loved or being used? And then a person really entertained, well, maybe being used has its benefits, right? But if you've actually ever experienced someone loving you, caring for you, caring about you, speaking to you, treating you, and acting with you in the spirit of love, I mean, maybe there's somebody out there for some reason that would choose being abused, but I can't think of why. You know what I'm saying? I just can't think of why. And so the same dynamic comes in with sex. And that's what we talked about. Where are you at? And to not demonize yourself because you are in a place. Like, if you are just thinking about lust, if you are in a place where you are utilizing sex talk and sex improperly, cool. Okay. We understand and we're accepting of that. And when I'm saying I'm talking about the different parts of you. We understand that this is where we are. Now what we have to decide is, where do we want to be? And then start crafting a reality that helps us create that. And that's what we're really good at, helping you understand, simplify, and utilize in a way so that you can win.
All right. So then the fifth thing that we learned and talked about is what we can do, right? So we had a little bit of a conversation. The Black Love School always comes down to what you can do, because we are always talking about the heart work or the homework that you're taking with you. So what we all agreed to do was to journal, either on your phone or on paper. I'm a fan of paper, although I do take journal notes in my phone often. There is something about, again, making something concrete with your own handwriting and your own time in a physical way, with your pen and your paper. But we talked
about journal with the camera too on your phone.
Yes. And so actually just making it concrete in words, which I also think is extremely important, especially when we're talking about sex talk, is how you will decide on a word and let it come out of your mouth, and the ability to rewatch. You get to learn so much in your phone because you can watch how you're expressing yourself. So that's the way you move your hands. I tend to move my hands a lot. The way that you move your eyes, right? And even the tone and the pauses is something that you don't always pick up when you're writing. And we do have different writing styles from our speaking style. Right. But the idea behind this heart work was to write about what you're thinking about sex, the insecurities, what you desire, and to do it for a pattern of 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, but to come to a kind of completion around an idea by picking up that momentum for a certain amount of time. And the thing about journaling is to make it your truest thought, right? Your most pure first instinct thought. And this is the making your feelings more concrete, because when we say thought in a kind of global way, and it is global, but a lot of times when we're talking about thought in this modern time, we're talking about forcing ourselves to stay logical. And that is not all that thought is. Thought also has emotional aspects to it. Thought is also the blend and the working out of something. And that's why I say things like make it concrete and plain. So that's very important because we want to be able to get to the point where we can, uncover insecurities and we can deal with shame, embarrassment, and even pure desire without the logical overcrowding us and saying that can't happen or that that's not good to desire or whatever it is. We can talk ourselves out of the most natural, pure expression by forcing ourselves to only stay logical. So this is pure first instinct, your secret Dear Diary journal, right? With the idea of going deeper and uncovering some things that may be subconscious and kind of unconscious even to us that we want to make more conscious. So, on that note, those are the 5 things that we kind of took a deep dive in last night in the Black Love School. And we are still in the season of intimacy and sex. And if you'd like to join us for the next live Q&A, you can click the link to join the Black Love School, where you're going to get over 50 classes in the art and science of Black love culture. And you can absolutely stick with us for the rest of the summer session, where we plan to be better at sex, get better at sex, get more
Everybody
out of sex.
Wants that.
And we would love to see you on the next live Q&A. So that's going to happen in 2 weeks.
So until that time, as always, we greet you in peace, and we're saying have more divine, sacred, holistic sexual activity, sexual conversation, sexual experiences, so that you can expand your mind and get closer to manifesting the aspects of God, whether you're going to have children or not. But that spiritual energy exchange is real and is so vital to our thought, speech, and action as we move around in the world. So let's get some more greater, better, deeper sex, and sex talk is the bridge to that. So as always, we're greeting you. Niyakoma. See you next time.